Welcome to Just Break Up, the podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra DeMulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell. And today we're going to be answering a letter from somebody who is struggling with internalized stigma about HIV. But before we begin, we just want to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that Sierra and I are not licensed mental health practitioners.
No. We are not professionals. We are not trained or accredited in any of this. These are just literally our feelings. So please keep that in mind. We are only here to offer our humble musings to hopefully shed some understanding and maybe some laughs on the incredibly rewarding, but mostly confusing experience that is love. All right. Today's letter is from POS, whose pronouns are he, him, who is writing to us from the void. Dear Sam and Sierra, I've never felt the need to write in because so many of the letters directly or indirectly reflect my own life, but I've finally come to a situation that I can't recall you discussing, and I need some love, tough or otherwise. I'm a 34-year-old male who recently met a wonderful guy, 37, on a vacation in Mexico City. We spent 4 out of my 6 nights together and really clicked. He's a total cutie and the sex was great. We continued to text regularly once I returned home. About 2 months later, we made plans for him to come visit me in my city here in the States. Before he booked his flight, he sent me a message that said there was something he had to tell me about before he made the trip. He is HIV positive. He went on to explain that he manages it closely and is on the appropriate medication to be undetectable, so I was not at risk when we hooked up in Mexico. I think I reacted okay. I told him it didn't change my feelings, but that I've never been with a positive partner before, and I might need his patience as I navigate exactly what that means. He came for the trip, and we had a wonderful time. My question is this: how do I overcome my own internalized stigma around this disease? Intellectually, I understand how far science has come and that he can manage his HIV the same way one manages diabetes or high blood pressure. But I haven't been able to shake an unsafe feeling when we're being intimate or thoughts about how my family or friends would react if they learned his status. I know this is absolute bullshit in 2024, but I'm still struggling with it. In some ways, it's crushing because I feel like my own worst fear, and I've had casual sex over the years for it to be a legitimate concern, has happened to someone I care about. How do I navigate the waters of having a positive partner? Thank you, POS.
All right, POS, thank you so much for writing to us and for asking us this important question. I think it's really understandable that you are having a lot of sort of feelings about learning this about your partner. We have been taught a lot about HIV and a lot about people who have HIV that have been really negative. And also, I think a lot of us learned things about HIV that are no longer true, given the science and the ways in which people are much more capable of treating their HIV to a point where it becomes untransmittable, which is amazing that science has come this far. And so I want to just name that you're not a bad person for having these reactions, these worries, these things come up in you because they're the product of lots of things that we've been taught, often falsely, about HIV and what it means to be intimate with somebody who has HIV. So we're going to get into some ways to think about how you can give yourself some grace for having these thoughts that you didn't choose, but that are coming to you, and how you can remind yourself about what you know to be true and move forward in good partnership with this wonderful person who you are now seeing. But before we do that, we are going to take a quick break.
All right, my darling, welcome back. And thank you so much for listening for all these years, for learning alongside us, and for the vulnerability that it took to write this question. We're so happy to help you along this journey. And I first just want to say, I already think you're doing a great job. I almost got choked up reading like just your response because of the grace that you gave yourself and your partner when you said like, I think I handled it okay, and that like you might need to be patient because I've never had a positive partner before, but that it didn't change your feelings about them. And I mean, what a beautiful, rich, fertile place to start. You are curious, you're compassionate, you're open. And that's the place to start when unpacking our own conditioned understandings and our stigmas. And Sam's totally right. Like the AIDS epidemic and the world's response to it was such a huge and catastrophic failing in so many ways. And just one of the small examples of that is the aftermath, is the collective fear mongering, the misinformation, the lack of resources, the prejudice against folks who get HIV. We were talking about it just this past weekend, and we were talking about like the fear that we grew up with around HIV and other sexual transmitted infections and diseases, and how particularly I think our generation, growing up in the 90s and the early 2000s, like they were trying to be proactive, and they took, this abstinence only, dare, say no to drugs, 100% fear-based education, adding that fear-based education to a society riddled with homophobia. Yeah.
And a lot of hatred towards drug users as well.
Yes, exactly. I was just going to say.
Yeah, for sure.
And literally trying to like crawl our way out of the administrations that turned their cheek to so many ill and dying people. We're unpacking a lot. And I just want to say you are exactly where you need to be. You have everything you need within you right now, emotionally, to sit in the discomfort of those stigmas that we learned, right? And that is the first step, right? Is just, I'm so proud of you for being like, you might need a little patience, but I'm here. I'm showing up, right? It's like, I think about people who show up to dirty jobs. It's not that they don't think they're dirty. They just show up and do them anyway. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I'm thinking about like nurses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They're like, nurses aren't not grossed out by like vomit or blood or bodily fluids, right?
Sure.
I don't know why I'm going here. But emotionally, when we're talking about like unpacking our conditioned understanding or actively changing our internal stigmas, like you're showing up to that crunchy, sticky, dirty work, right? And you're saying, I'm not afraid of the feelings that might come up. And you're going to have feelings come up. And the way that we change our feelings is that we welcome them in and we talk to them, and then they change shape. You know what I mean? They eventually change. That's a really fucking weird way to say, like, you're doing good. And that, like, It's going to be crunchy until it's smooth, so says Sam.
It's one of those things where it's like the crunchiness comes up, and then we look at the crunchiness and assume that like something is wrong, right? Or that we can't handle it, right? Like this idea of like doing this like really hard, sticky work as being like, oh, if it's hard and sticky, it's bad, right? Like I'm not doing it right. And in actuality, right? Like it's hard and sticky and crunchy because it's hard and sticky and crunchy work to unlearn these things that we have been taught. And I think especially, I don't know how you identify, but like as somebody who grew up as a gay man, right? Like the idea of like the specter of HIV was like present all the time, right? Like it was something that I thought about so much of the time. And now what's great is that like, because of the science, right? Folks are undetectable. Their HIV levels are undetectable, and therefore they can't transmit the virus to people. Like it is impossible for them to do it. And so like the specter of HIV has changed for sure, but it is like, growing up in a time where this is like what we thought and talked about all the time, right? Like we had elders who like a generation of elders who passed from this disease, right? We had people in our lives that I had in my life that had HIV and were struggling to sort of like keep it in a way that wasn't hurting them, right? So like, and now we're in a completely different iteration of this. And so I just want to like name that like, this is going to be challenging to unlearn for sure. Some of these preconceived notions that we might have about HIV, and the fact that the emotions are coming up isn't a problem, right? Like you're not a bad person for feeling like, a little bit of trepidation around being intimate because of all of these things that you learned and these experiences that you had that weren't your choice, but that were given to you by other people, by the society that we lived in, by the experiences that you might have had. And so I want to just name that, like, you feeling uncomfortable or a little bit nervous about that doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong or that you're a bad person. It just means that you're uncomfortable and nervous about it. And that's okay, right? So how do we welcome in those feelings and say, oh, yep, there's that nervousness again, as opposed to saying, I'm nervous. That means that's bad. I'm not doing this right. Something should be different, right? And instead say, nope, there's that nervousness again. Of course, nervousness is coming. Why wouldn't it, given everything that's happened, right? And this nervousness isn't telling me anything important besides the fact that I'm nervous, right? I know that I can get through this because I've been nervous before, and I've also done things that are hard, right? You know, like this is not something that is insurmountable, and it's actually deeply understandable that this is the emotion that's coming up, given everything that I've been through and everything that I've learned. And I'm choosing to do something different than what I had been taught or learned about what I should be doing, right? Like I'm going to recognize that nervousness, hold it for myself, say it's okay that it's happening, and then figure out what comes next, right? How do I move through that nervousness into where I want to be, which it sounds like is intimacy with this wonderful person that you're currently dating.
I think it's a perfect example of the times in which you need to take stock of what's happening in your brain, you know, like take stock of the feelings, like, okay, I'm having these feelings, I'm having this nervousness, this is where that's coming from. And also at the same time, in the same moment and in the same body, I know that, that there's medication, that that people with HIV right now live long and happy and healthy lives, that, you know, he is undetectable and therefore, unable to transfer. You know, like you can go through your brain and say, I have this fear that I inherited, rightfully so, right? And that's the other thing I just want to say is that, like, you're not a bad person for being afraid, right? You're not a bad person for being afraid because of this history, you know, and also things have changed. So we can hold these two things, they feel opposing, but they can actually be married. They can be partners in this. You know, you can decide, you can say, I'm nervous, and rightfully so, from all of the conditioning that I've experienced, you know. And also I know the advancements in science have made this a very nominal, this is not a risk to me right now. You can go on PrEP as a partner. You can use condoms. You can test yourself every 3 months. Ultimately, you are safe if your partner is being a responsible patient, and taking care of their own wellness, and as they should, because they deserve that.
Yeah. And I think as you're thinking about like how to do some of this perspective shift, you know, you write in your letter, you know, in some ways it's really crushing that I feel like my own worst fear has happened to someone that I care about. And I want you to practice curiosity about how your partner is experiencing their positive status, right? Like, I know that this is your worst fear, and you don't know how it's sitting in their body, right? Like, you don't know how he is feeling about it. And I think it's important to do that because I think we can like project some of this stuff onto other people, especially other people's experiences that we haven't had, right? We can say, oh my God, this must be terrible. And they might come to us and say like, I don't know, it's actually just like a thing that I'm dealing with and like, it's all fine, right? You know, like or this is my worst fear, and having him talk about like, yeah, it was devastating when I learned, but now I'm really realizing that it's something that I can like handle and that I've got a good grasp on it, right? Can also, I think, like help shape your response to it, right? And I think about like how you can be a supportive partner for somebody who is positive is probably not about like you kind of putting your own fears and feelings on this person, but instead being really curious about what does it look like for me to help support you in this experience that you're having, right? How can I help you navigate what this means for you as a partner? And how can we also talk about how we're going to navigate it as a couple, right? Like, what are some of the things that we might need to be thinking about or talking about or supporting each other in order to, move forward in what will hopefully be a long-term and happy and fun relationship, but that has this important thing that's part of it that you both need to be able to talk about and hold with each other. Because it's not just one of yours to hold, and it's not just yours to like figure out how to get over, like there's work that can be done here as a couple. And I appreciate that sounds like what you're doing. And it sounds like your partner is really receptive to that, which is really good. But I do want to offer you an invitation into more curiosity about what your partner's experience of HIV has been as a way to not put your own stuff on him, and also as a way to maybe like change your perspective a little bit about like the specter of HIV that has been like held over all relationships between people who have penises. Like that's the place where we're at this moment.
I think that's a beautiful reframe and where we can wrap up. I think it's so nice. Again, it's like an extension of approaching with curiosity. And like one way that we change our understanding of something is being open and curious to actually actively listening. Like, so let me know what you need. What are you feeling? What has this experience been like for you? Can help shape, for me, I think I would be able to access my empathy and my caretaking and I would ease my anxiety because I would go into that mode of like curiosity. I don't know. You said it beautifully. I think that was a great place to conclude. So to our letter writer, we're excited for you. This cutie sounds cute. And so do you.
Absolutely. And I hope that you two have a wonderful relationship with each other, because it sounds like you're already laying good groundwork for conversation and support and curiosity with each other. And I love that. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like more content from us, or if you would like access to our monthly office hours, you can support us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon for as little as $5 a month, you'll get an additional bonus weekly episode, as well as access to all of our office hours. That's patreon.com/justbreakuppod.
You can slide into our DMs and send us your favorite relationship meme, but most importantly, you can submit your questions about all matters of the heart at justbreakuppod.com, which is also where you can find our merchandise.
Please remember to like, follow, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review. This literally keeps our mics on and helps us reach more brokenhearted souls who need two random strangers giving them relationship advice.
Just Break Up is a production of Duvid Media, original music recording, editing, producing, all magical things from our best friend, Spencer Worth Davis. Make sure to check out his podcast and his music. And remember, it's okay to be a little uneasy as you learn something new. Growth is meant to be a little uncomfortable, and it is in those spaces that we can change for the better. And if all else fails,
just break up.